I'm Walter Cronkite. This is the story of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the strong man who in a little more than a decade led Turkey out of the Middle Ages and into the 20th century.
During World War I, the Ottoman Empire was a massive and influential state, but after the war began to falter. Sooner or later, due to many internal and external conflicts, the empire dissolved. Out of the ashes, however, one man created the Republic of Turkey and turned it into a thriving secular nation. His name was Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, and he created something great, but when he died, no one could recreate what he had done for the country. His death caused the country to dissolve into disarray, which eventually led to multiple military coups d'etats in the country, which are still happening to this day. From the ruins of a dilapidated Ottoman Empire, there was left an incredible power vacuum in the region of Anatolia that incubated a young Turkey, founded by Ataturk. Such a nation hereby needed a leader as persistent and forward-thinking as Ataturk in order to triumphantly drive Turkey towards becoming a prosperous nation for close to 20 years. However, following Ataturk's death, the ideals of Ataturk, also known as Kemalism, were maintained to an unreasonable degree, with the military radically backing up these ideals. Tragically, the ideals of the government that followed clashed with those of the military and led to the violent military insurrection of coups that followed. While the armistice of Madros ended the fighting between the Allies and the Ottomans in 1918, it did not bring peace to the Ottoman Empire. The empire had been struggling since the mid-1800s, and World War I had weakened the empire even further. The Young Turk government had collapsed in the days leading up to the armistice, and many leaders fled the country to a much more stable Germany. The infrastructure in Europe was already weakened by the war, and many groups were becoming angry with the state of their empire. During all of this, Kemal Ataturk emerged as a leading figure in the nation. He and his supporters sought to establish a new Turkish state from the ashes of the Ottoman Empire, based on Anatolia, where many of the Turkish population originally lived. From the ashes of the Ottoman Caliphate, and the region that was so heavily religion-based, was born a new nation. Turkey's first president, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, was unanimously elected on the 29th of October, 1923, thereby marking the genesis of the Turkish Republic. Ataturk was born in the city of Thessaloniki in northern Greece. His father was a low-level customs officer. He did well in school and was admitted into the military academy at Manchester. Ataturk graduated as a lieutenant and then joined a secret society of anti-Ottoman Empire activists called the Vatan. They became active protesters of the Ottoman Empire. In 1907, he joined the Committee of Union and Progress, more commonly known as the Young Turks. The Young Turks seized power, and Ataturk became a prominent military leader. He led the Ottoman Empire during the Gallipoli campaign, which was the single greatest victory for the Ottoman Empire during the First World War. Later, culminating on 9/11, 1919, Ataturk initiated a week-long effort to create a congress across the essentially defunct Ottoman Empire. However, after his party was elected, the parliament fell to British hands. Ataturk then threatened to attack Istanbul in order to gain independence from the British. Instead of fighting Ataturk's army, the British opted for a peace treaty which recognized an independent Turkish state. That October, the Grand National Assembly of Turkey, or Turkey's parliament, proclaimed the Republic of Turkey and elected Mustafa Kemal Ataturk as its first president. Ataturk went to great lengths to secularize Turkey, despite the majority of its population being Islamic. He closed all of the religious courts and schools, prohibited the wearing of Muslim headscarves by public sector employees, lifted a ban on alcohol, adopted the Gregorian calendar instead of the Islamic one, made Sunday a day of rest instead of Friday, changed the Turkish alphabet from Arabic letters to Roman ones, mandated that the call of prayer be in Turkish rather than Arabic, and forbade the wearing of fez hats. Ataturk made great efforts to modernize the newly founded Turkey. He established a national railway system, as well as brought forth social reforms. He separated church and state by dissolving religious courts. He gave women equal rights and got rid of laws that discriminate, such as the covering laws. This paved the way for the nation to start modernizing and catching up with the rest of the world. The civilized world is far ahead. We have no choice but to catch up, said Ataturk. Because Ataturk was so popular with the people, his death grew a gigantic outpouring of grief from the Turkish people. A lavish mausoleum was erected in his honor, which still attracts millions of visitors every year. In the decades following Ataturk's death, a new party arose to challenge the once unopposed Republican Party, the Democratic Party. This new party was more focused on religious agenda than keeping Turkey secular, the opposite of Ataturk's vision for the nation. The Republican Party, formerly led by Ataturk, clashed with the Democratic Party in the first multi-party elections in 1946. During the transition period from Turkey being a single-party state to a multi-party state, there was a large amount of political unrest. The military stayed loyal to the Republican Party and kept the values of Ataturk, while the Democratic Party's ideals were vastly different. These tensions between the two parties culminated in 4 coups d'etats in 1960, 1971, 1980, and 2016. The first military coup in Turkey took place in 1960. The new Democratic Party, led by Prime Minister Adnan Menderes and President Celal Bayar, wanted to remove the secular law that Ataturk had put in place to ensure that there were no biases towards any religion. The military, however, was focused on upholding the values of Ataturk and keeping his rules in place. The tensions rose between the two groups until the military decided to take action. The military staged a coup d'etat and imposed martial law onto Turkey to protect Ataturk's values. The president, prime minister, and several cabinet members were arrested and tried for treason, among other offenses, and the military stayed in power for 5 years until 1965. The second military coup that took place was in 1971. In the 1960s, the Turkish economy experienced a significant economic downturn. The Turkish currency value had diminished, and the economy was mostly stagnant. This recession caused workers to stage demonstrations, and both left-wing and right-wing groups began to violently protest. Memduh Tagmak, the chief of the general staff, sent a letter to the prime minister, Süleyman Demirel, who was loyal to the Democratic Party. The letter blamed him and his government for the poor economic performance and demanded the formation of a strong and credible government inspired by Ataturk's views. Demirel resigned hours later, after meeting with his cabinet. During the period following Demirel's resignation, the military did not directly rule. Instead, they installed a caretaker government and appointed various leaders to lead the nation up until 1973, when Parliament installed Fahri Koruturk as president. The instability continued after the 1971 coup, which led to Turkey's third coup in 1980. Turkey had 11 prime ministers in the 1970s, and the economy is still mostly stagnant. Left and right-wing military groups continued their violent demonstrations in the streets. The military decided that an intervention was necessary and planned to stage Turkey's third coup in 1979. The coup was delayed until September of 1980, when the military announced on live television that martial law was now in effect. During this coup, 50 people were executed, over 500,000 were arrested, and hundreds died in prison. The military decided to draft a new constitution, which focused on things such as the rules of election of the president. Even in present day, Turkey is still in an awful state of disarray. Turkey's current president, Tayyip Erdogan, has been using his power to radically change Turkey. There have been many protests against Erdogan, and his government has come under fire from not only his people, but also from the rest of the world multiple times throughout his time as president. Some political scientists don't even consider Turkey to be a fully fledged democracy anymore, due to the absence of fair elections and freedom of press. In 2016, a military coup was staged against Erdogan and his government. The coup leaders pointed to both corruption and the threat to Turkey's secularism as motivations for their wiles. They attempted to seize control of several key places in Ankara, Istanbul, and elsewhere, but failed to do so after forces loyal to the state defeated them. In 2017, Erdogan instated a presidential program, which further increased his power, giving the executive branch more power. He has used the military's distortion of Ataturk's ideals to take power and to change the social reforms that Ataturk put in place. Overall, it is a tragedy that Turkey is straying so far from the founding principles of Ataturk that once made the nation great. His triumph of creating a striving nation out of the ruins of a past empire is overshadowed by the divided political parties and military coups. Ataturk's vision for Turkey's future was not two parties constantly at odds. Rather, he wanted a nation that could compete with the greatest nations in the world, and it is truly a tragedy to see the current state of Turkey compared to what it once was.